All right. This is David Rice. This is my Substack Hit Christian. I have today with me author S.B. Farnsworth. She writes immersive deep shelf fiction, and she has noble characters battling dark worlds. She is an author of four novels. She has a collection of creative nonfiction, and she edited an anthology for the Joplin Writers Guild when she was president of the chapter. So thank you for coming to the podcast. I really appreciate it. I read your book. I would like you to run me through it a little. It was a good book, but it was a hard read. And it's your first novel, so just start with everything. And for some reason, I know the names of the character and can't remember the title, which is a terrible thing. All right.
It's
So
Woman of the Stone.
Woman on the Stone, and thank you. I appreciate the reminder. That should be something I should have had memorized. And I even shared your book with someone else, and I said, I'm interviewing an author, and they're like, oh, really? And I was like, yeah, here's the book, and here's how to find them. And so I pointed them to your website and sent them your direction. So.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the interview.
Not a problem. So, when I was going through the book, Emerald's, of course, the main character. She's your protagonist. And you start the book off with a battle scene right off the start. And she has this sword that has almost an intelligence behind it, you would
Hmm.
describe it as. So, of course, in book one, you don't really reveal too much throughout the whole book, but there's something going on there. Um,
Yeah.
what can you tell a person before they read the book about the relationship Emerald has with her sword?
All right. So the sword is uh, an arcane sword, and it's imbued with the essential elements of someone who passed away. And it hasn't yet been revealed, but I'll give you a little thing. Um, it is the final forging of the sword is done on the funeral pyre of the person with unfinished business.
Okay. All right. So, and funeral pyres do play a part in the story later on. And so I do understand that a little bit better from having read the book. So, as she goes through the story, she's very concerned with adopting orphans into her excuse me, into her castle, her keep. Um, she comes from a royal line, but there's no royalty left she's
Right. It's
in
been
the
a
north.
war of attrition
Yeah,
and she's the last one.
yeah. And so she has a prophecy where she will restore the royal line and empire.
She'll res- she'll so the during the fracture wars 400 years prior
Mhm.
when Dana was alive, and that's when the empire split.
Okay, so there's a split and between the north and the south, and then the mountains become this barrier. So
Yes.
so there's this barrier, and then there's a passage isn't allowed by the mountain men
I'm sorry.
to
Oh,
pass
they're secret, so nobody knows the secrets except the sages.
the sages. Okay. So, and you have different societies, and all the societies seem to have pretty well developed um, cultures in them. And the south, where Stefan is, or Stefan eventually goes to, you have a very
He goes north, but
north. Okay,
yeah,
north. Sorry.
yeah. He's from the north, and the sage, Sariala, brought him down after his parents were killed by a usurper, a tyrant.
Okay, sorry, I got that mixed up in my head. And so where he's at, there's a really cruel tyrant, and he's turned their nation into well, a nation of psychopaths almost. Um
Yeah, yeah.
because of his cruelty, and you can almost feel that as you explore the north with Stefan. And
Hmm.
so and then in the South, you have set up judges, and there's this judicial system. And then in the mountains with the sages, you have a matriarchal
The
system.
sages are from the north.
Okay,
The
sorry.
mountains has the matriarchal society on the one half. the
Okay.
west wind, and then the east ice is different. They're mysterious, and they're separated by the sacred mountain under which is the tunnel.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
All right. So yeah, feed
But
me.
that's all the weeds.
Yeah. Well, I know that's all the
Uh,
weeds. And but I'm trying to figure, so this is me trying to figure it out because I like those types of details as I try to
uh,
dig into a story. And I
it's all
want
there, but it's very slow reveal. It's character driven,
mm,
and you don't learn about the sword because that hasn't been relevant yet. You don't
sure.
know, but that mystery will come out in book three
Okay.
a lot better. So, um, yeah, I try to keep most of the names simple. Like I say, a couple of them are hangovers from after reading Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit so many times. But,
So
Emerald goes by M and
mhm.
Stefan goes by
Well,
Han.
when did you write this story for the first time?
It was the summer of my after fourth grade. We went to the Escalante Staircase in Utah, and
Okay.
we hiked up a place called Calf Creek Falls. And we hiked through this box canyon, red sandstone, really gorgeous desert all around. And then you get up to this waterfall, and it's like an oasis in there because there's so much greenery, birds, and all butterflies, and everything so pretty, and fish in the water. And
Mm,
that just that is in the book. Obviously, you probably remember that
yeah.
um,
You do
canyon,
have
but
you have a description of a red canyon. Is that what you're
mhm,
referencing? Yeah.
with the waterfall and all that. Yeah, that's what. See, all of my stories are triggered by spectacular settings. So you're gonna see some really beautiful things in your mind, of course.
Mm.
But yeah,
So you wrote this at a really young age. I think in fourth grade, the best I was doing was getting in
well,
trouble and
it
getting
was
kicked.
not in form back then. It took all the way till 2019 to have it
Mm,
finished. Because I rewrote it like 100 times. I mean, really,
mm,
revision after revision after revision, and I matured as an author. This book this story has the power to make a dyslexic person an author.
well,
Overcome all my spelling errors and everything else to really learn all the grammar and do all that. And now I teach English, so
okay. Well, that's impressive. So, your journey as an author, that is interesting that you chose to be an author even through your dyslexia. That so this was your first published novel. Talk me through that process. How difficult was it to go through?
it was super difficult. I tried uh, for 5 years really hard to get traditionally published.
Hmm.
I really respect traditional publishing and all that. I've since learned a lot about it that they keep secret that kind of makes that less desirable. But for high fantasy, if you want an agent,
Hmm.
because there was only one place I could send my unsolicited manuscript without an agent, and that was to Daw. And I did, but
Hmm.
he didn't take it. So Peter Stanfill, he didn't take it. So what was I to do? So I kept working on it, and improving my craft. I took that as, maybe it's not ready. So I really worked hard.
Yeah.
And I put out, emails to the three people who accept um, fantasy authors as to be their agent. I looked in the book, the big author book, the guide, writer's guide.
Yeah, the writer's market. Got
Yeah,
yeah.
and there were only three that ever accepted, and when I looked them up, only two were accepting. So I sent to the one, and I waited a year, and I
Mhm.
kept working on the next book and the next book and the next book, kept writing, and never did hear one word back from any agent. So that left me with self-publishing, and so I hired a professional cover designer,
Uh-huh.
And I went over my blurb, many, many times with the Joplin Writers Guild and all the fine people there, and they helped a lot with, reading that first chapter, saying, "Oh, I think, you need to do something," because first I started right in the battle scene, and
Yes.
and it was kinda horrific, it was a little bit, and I was like, I don't I
Do you
want
mind if I share the
people.
screen of your book uh, while we're talking?
Okay, alright, well, I got the T-shirt on, but
Well, yeah. Oh, I didn't think I
oh, there's
shared.
the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep,
good.
that's right off my website.
Yep. So yeah, right there is. See if I can blow it up. It's not letting me, but right there. So go ahead and talk.
So, well, let's see. I was kinda stuck, right? I had to learn all the publishing skills and make choices. There are a lot of choices out there for who do you wanna publish through, who do you want to be your distributors, I should say.
Mhm.
And so I started making all those choices. So I have my own, press. It's called Stone Wolf Press, and
That makes sense from the
that's
book.
what I publish under all that press for all my books. I have 4 novels, like you say, and a couple of other books out.
So I'll go back to your front page. So you have Hard Start, Title Pulse, Woman in
That
Stone.
one will come out in October, Title Pulse.
Okay, October. And then
Uh-huh.
below that is Monarch in Flames. And this is A Rare Connection.
Mhm.
So these are
Thematically, they all, work together.
okay.
So then I have some short story giveaways.
All right. So this is everything you've written up on your website. So people who want to learn more about what you write, so if they like what they like Woman in Stone, they can go pick up some of these other copies
Mhm.
and follow it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have you, grab one of those short stories for free and come on
And
my newsletter.
yeah,
It
and
might be
it's
about once a month, and you can hear about all the events and different things going on.
yeah, it's just svfarnsworthauthor.com/books to get to your website. So I'll go ahead and stop share, but just help you out there. So
Thank you.
you decided to do the self-publishing route, and it was
Yeah, I really had no choice, did I? I mean, what
wow.
was I gonna do? So, I went through Draft Digital for my digital, and
Hmm.
I used Ingram Spark for my print.
Okay.
So Ingram Spark is the independent author arm of Ingram, and Ingram is who prints all the traditionally published books. So I wanted the highest quality, I wanted in libraries, or at least the potential. So I wanted in their catalogs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm K-12 library media specialist, and now I teach adult English language learners at Crowder College.
Yeah, no, I think being in the libraries is very important for most authors. Um, I think John Grisham would go around to libraries when he first started, and he had the legend is, I don't know if it's completely true or not, but the legend is he had a trunk full of books, and he would just drive around and put it, say, hey, here's my book. Would you please take it? And he'd just go to all the libraries he could drive to in a weekend and donate them. And I think that's what jump started his career. So it's libraries are an important resource for a new author. So
They are. It's really interesting though that 99% of librarians are Democrats.
yes. The,
So me
yeah.
being a conservative, that means, you know, I don't know how much of a shot I actually ever had, but I am in hoopla. I have
Oh, I think we're losing you there for a second, SV. So there is a bit of a struggle with getting a conservative presence in a library for an author. One of the things that I found is that most libraries have a request feature, so you can request copies of a book in the
Hmm.
library.
And
And
that's what you
so,
do. You ask your newsletter followers and anybody you meet, "Hey, would you like to have my book in your library? Won't cost you anything, you know."
yeah,
And so they can get physical copies, they can do the cost per checkout, they can buy an ebook for like the state databases or whatever, and that way more people can read the books.
and you're in Hoopla, you said.
Yep, Hoopla and a lot of other library apps, just about all of them.
Do you do
So
audiobooks also?
I haven't done an audiobook yet. I'm waiting till I'm
Okay.
rich and famous. They're expensive to create, so
Yeah, they are. I've been going to the Springfield Writers Guild, and I've heard them talk about that process, and it can be kind of expensive because you have to pay a certain amount to
voice
the
actor.
narrator up front,
Hmm.
and so that is a process. Self-publishing is a pretty big process all the way through. And I see that in your book, you have scrolling in the start of each of your chapters. So did you do that yourself or did you hire someone?
Like I say, Draft to Digital has an incredible book tool,
Okay.
and so you take your clean Word document. There's a little trick to it. Okay, so you've got to take your Word document that might have hidden things that even when you reveal codes, you can't see. So those will break it. And you
Mhm.
can't have any double returns and different things like that. And you want to put a symbol, I just put a hashtag, as my scene break. And
Hmm.
then you write chapter one, chapter two, whatever. So then I go through, so I take and I remove all styles by just, and everything, all the errors, anything that might be hiding in that file by turning it into a plain text.
Yeah.
Then I bring it back into a Word and I apply two styles, the one for chapters and the one for the scene breaks.
Mm.
That's it. Take that Word document to Draft to Digital, select what how you want it to look, and so you get a beautiful book, you get the all the title page and all the in matter, all done for you, including the
The scrolling and stuff.
beautiful. Yeah, I've got the scroll there, and then for the scene breaks, I have two arrows crossed. And there's a lot to choose from, more than a dozen of
Okay.
those type of things. And so then the formatting's perfect, and you know exactly how many pages to tell your cover designer to make your spine for the wraparound. And um, I have a great cover designer out of Joplin. Her name's
Hmm.
Mandy Tepe.
Okay.
She's also an author and writes sweet Christian uh, motorcycle club romance.
Okay.
She's
I've never heard
awesome.
of motorcycle club romance, but
MC,
that's
yeah,
okay.
it's a big thing.
I did to know. There's a
Yeah.
lot that I'm learning in this process, so that's cool. So, if you are a new author and you can feel kind of intimidated, what are some of the steps you would suggest for a new author?
Do your homework. I suggest that uh, go to authormedia.com and just make yourself a little free account. Check out the free podcast episodes that are there, and get your download your free course that Thomas Umstadt Jr. offers, and just listen to his podcast. He's got two, maybe three. He says he's got a hidden one coming.
Okay.
Anyway, he's great, and it's the novel marketing podcast is the longest running novel marketing podcast out there,
Mhm.
over 10 years. And then he's got the Christian publishing show too that he's done for 5 years. And so all those resources are there. And he's got authormedia.social. So you can and socialize with everybody who has either downloaded the free course or bought one of his other courses. And I bought almost all his courses. They're great.
Okay. So that's a good resource, and I'll put that in the notes. So author media and then digital, you said digital draft?
Drafted, yeah, I'll type those in
Okay.
here. Draft
Digital.
2 Digital is the number 2,
Okay.
and I highly recommend them. They are fantastic. It costs you nothing
Hmm.
except if you sell something, they take like 10% for distributing. So
Okay.
you can go through them to everybody. You don't have to go direct to Amazon and do it double. You just do
Hmm.
it once, click the button or uncheck the box, and it's all that easy. Really
Okay.
is.
That is a good thing. So let's go back to your story since we've discussed the process, some of it. Emerald experiences a lot of trauma in the story. She experiences some romance, but she experiences a lot of trauma. Why did you write that story? You,
I wrote
what?
that story because of my family history and
Mm,
how generational trauma has affected me, and to kind of work through how to find a happy ending for people who maybe yet haven't really found their happy ending and haven't really overcome. And so for me, overcoming trauma is a big deal. Advocating for people who have experienced that and survived it. They
yeah,
survive, and yet it changes you. So, how do you understand people who make choices don't make sense to people who
yeah,
haven't been through it? And how do you understand and support people who really need it but will push you away because they don't trust anyone anymore? So,
yeah, yeah. Her, Valerie, and you said Varen or Varen?
Byron,
Byron, sorry.
Byron,
They all three experienced trauma at the hands of, well, for Valerie and say
Byron,
Byron.
Byron.
They're twins and they experienced trauma at the hands of a relative. And it's pretty hard to read. I mean, I'm a survivor of trauma too. And so for me, it was difficult to read. And then for Valerie, or sorry, go back to Emerald, she experiences trauma from strangers, um, kind of strangers. And then the third one is someone who she trusts, but then he violates her trust in the end. And so it it was for me going through what I've gone through, um it was a difficult, all difficult moments to read through. And so, and I understand why you wrote it. And so, but I would like you to talk about some of that, uh, dig through it a little for people who are like me, who struggle with that part of it.
Yeah, well, we're talking about sexual assault, so just to
Yeah.
name it right out there, and people don't talk about that.
Mm,
The fantasy is the genre where a lot of that is addressed, and um, so I think that's why, at an early age, that drew me, even though I didn't know what was going on, at that age, had no
hmm.
idea what had happened or anything to the people in my life, the women in my life, why they were the way they were.
Yeah.
But I think I just, you know, intuition, stuff. And so none of that was in the story until later as I matured, that the character matured, my questions matured, and the things I needed to know and work through, the emotions and all of that. So I write immersive fiction. You feel it, you're there. I mean,
Yeah.
you see everything, you taste every food, you know everything. And so that's to experience that, from your armchair. You're safe,
Yeah.
but you still feel it. You
And
still
you definitely do as a reader. It was definitely, I'm more detached in my own writing. I have a I'm economical and I'm terse. I have a terse economical style of writing. And that's just I think that comes from my working class background and then I was educated and so I have the words the higher vocabulary. So I can use the big fancy free, dollar words. But then
Yeah,
I tend to want to lean into the nickel words for a
yeah.
lot of my descriptions. And so that tends to be the way I describe things. And in my second book, I start off with actually my first book. I have a woman who is the mother of my protagonist, and she's broken and she's abusive, but her son doesn't really understand why. And she's not abusive to him, but she's very negligent. She won't care for him, and she has chosen the life and to support them because they live as refugees to work as a prostitute. And so she works as a prostitute to support them. But for the most part, whatever she gets, she spends and splurges the money and wastes it. And her son doesn't really understand that part of his mother. And in the second book, I explain why. When she was a young girl, her father would abuse her. And so, but I don't put you in that immersive part of it. When I describe it, it's very economical, it's very terse. You turn your head away almost. And I think
Hmm.
that comes from the way I was raised when the abuse was talked about, we turned our head away. And so,
Hmm.
and so even when I'm trying to face the issue, I still turn my head
Yeah,
away
this
from it.
was an emotional journey to write this book, and
Yeah.
it took all those decades for me, to be ready to write the scenes. Because sometimes I just write them real short, like a little
Hmm.
paragraph about what happened, and I kept looking at those ones as I went past because I knew how to write the next scene,
Mm.
and I wondered, well, why couldn't I write that chapter? And I don't want to trigger anybody too bad. I
Sure.
mean, I don't go
Yeah.
into the scenes. I don't glorify any of that.
No, you really don't. And I don't think you're detailed in that you're not one glorifying it. So it's not like and you're also not giving out lots and lots of details.
Right.
I do like, and without ruining the end for anybody, the end of the book, where Emerald realizes s- um the rock. And I'll just leave it there. But
Mhm.
um I do like the fact that you you don't describe what's happening to her physically as much as you describe her emotional state. And
Right.
so there's no physical descriptions as much as the emotional baggage she carries from the assaults.
Right. I mean, it's just a moment and, then it's over. That person's gone, but yet it carries so
Mhm.
far. I mean, and I also talk about generational in the book too. Her
Yeah.
grandmother.
Yeah, her grandma. Uh-huh. And which yeah, it brings up the whole ending, but it is it's powerful in that sense and it's hard to read through if you're a survivor, but I think if you're someone who hasn't dealt with their own trauma, it can be something that could be th cathartic. It could be something that um might help you face because a lot of the times we will remember events like that wrong.
Right.
Our
She
memory,
did. That's pretty par for the course,
yeah.
and you're it's a defense mechanism.
Mm.
Yet, that's the lie that you believe because that's what you thought would save you, was to
And lots of self-blame, self-recrimination. And you go through that and you talk about that. You make Emerald blame herself, then Valerie blames herself, Byron blames himself.
they
You
also
give lot
do. You act as if I make them do it, but
no,
to me,
no,
they're real characters. They
yeah,
really live,
yeah,
and what they would do is what they would do, and what they
yeah,
need is what they need, and that's what I didn't plot this story.
sure.
I'm not a plotter. Uh, I build the world, it all makes
Mm,
sense, it all is concrete, but only as necessary.
yeah, no,
There's a
and
lot that obviously about the sword. I haven't revealed that in any of the books yet in the series because it just hasn't come out as
mm,
important, but it is important and it will be. It's just when it needs to be there, it's there. If there's a shotgun on the wall, it's gonna go off.
yeah,
I don't
Chekhov's
write,
gun. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't write anything that isn't important. So unlike life, where 90% of your day doesn't really matter,
Hmm.
um, in a book, everything has to be important. You
Yeah.
don't waste anybody's time with even one extra word.
Hmm. And I agree with that. I do try to, even in my news articles, I try to keep them as tight as possible and focus slowly on what needs to be said. So, going past the assault part of it, when you're building the fantasy world for Emerald to live in, you have this big world, and you feel like in book one, she's part of a she's getting like this funnel, right? And so
Mhm.
she's seeing it in a very narrow view, but you can tell that the people around her have a much bigger view of the world than Emerald does. She's almost refusing to see the world as what
Right.
as it should be.
He's
Uh,
hiding.
yeah, and got Emerald seems to be running from her destiny or
Yeah,
the path that she knows she should be following.
right. Yeah,
So
she's totally hiding out and avoiding everything.
yeah, I you kind of pick that up with her arc. And I like her as a character. I enjoy reading the chapters that she's in. You don't split from her point of view a lot. You do occasionally, you move into Darren's point of view and uh help me out with Lai Mayo.
Liam Mayo, yeah.
Leah Mayo.
She just calls him Liam, so you can call him
Liam,
Liam.
okay. Liam Mayo, but Liam. He's another romantic interest. There is there is this concept in the book where orphans and taking in people who are orphans is very important. Why is
Right,
that?
that's the tradition of her people in Danilin is to take in orphans, and it's due to the 400-year curse on the family that they could only have sons. So
Mhm.
if they adopted orphans or accepted them into their school, then eventually, some of them are girls and they'll grow up and then they can get married and be able to continue the Stone clan. And so it, and they had equality and education, and it was a great society. And we don't know who the Wolf Clan is at first, and they
Mhm.
have come in and wiped out all the stones.
Yeah,
So Emerald's the
yeah,
last one.
yeah. You don't really get to see the Wolf Clan, and understand what their grudge is against the Dandelins at first, and you do sort of explain that over the first book. I'm sure there's more details to come. Am I
Oh,
right?
well, that battle is where the POVs start to split.
Mm.
After the battle, so we get some of Darren, we get some of Stefan, which is the the prince from the north that the sage has brought down to the south for protection
Okay.
after the north was
Yeah.
taken over.
Yeah, and and Emerald considers Stefan a brother because of the adoption policy that they have.
Hmm.
And so she's very close to him. And so and you've set up this love triangle between Liam and Darren. And so of course things will have to play out, and if someone wants to know more, they need to buy the second copy of the book or the second book in the series, not the second copy of the book, my bad, which is called, let me get that, Monarch in the Flames.
Yes.
And you said there's a third book, but I didn't see it on your website. Is that still in
I haven't
production?
written it yet.
Okay.
I've got all of it up in my head.
I
There may
understand.
even be a fourth book, as it, I've got two potential
Mm.
books still yet to write.
Yeah, I have for my fantasy series. I think I got a little ambitious, but I think it works. I have 12 in total, and I'm working on the third one, and I'm not published anywhere on anything. So no one can find me, no one can read it. It's all on my computer, so it's in the cloud. That's the only place
Yeah.
it exists. But it's challenging to keep that much material going. How do you make sure that you keep track of plot points, you keep track of character arcs? If you introduce a minor character that you know is going to be important later, how do you make sure you keep dragging them in so that the reader doesn't forget about them?
So in the beginning of book two, there is a scene in at the inn, and a little girl sings a song,
Hmm.
and she says that it was written by Jane of Appleton.
Okay.
And that was just, and I wrote the rest of the whole book, and I got to this character toward the very end, and I was like, what if that's Jane? That's Jane. Okay. So
Hmm.
then you tie and but it's pretty well after you've written the book, you look for those threads, those missed opportunities, and you
Yeah.
go and you link them back up. And so you
Yeah.
make the whole story weave together.
I
But
have
you
a
really have to have a whole book to do it.
I have a notepad called plot holes. And so that's where I keep track of things like that. And so I go through and I write down things like that, or I have missed opportunities, plot holes I need to patch up. And so as far as what the readers should be looking forward to in the third book, can you describe a little bit about the second book without giving too much away and what they should be looking forward in the third book?
So if you were looking for some of the romance to take place, a little bit more of that takes place in the second book.
Okay.
And you get a little bit of happy for now going on, and so that's pretty satisfying to see how these characters have healed to a certain extent and been able to experience joy and overcome a lot of their struggles. And then at the very end, everything is in peril again,
Yeah.
and they're facing impossible odds and terrible things, are about to happen or have just happened. And so book three is going to um, follow more of the story. There
Okay.
are at least three ways that Emerald is a woman of the stone.
Okay. So
And so there's three arcs to this book. And so there'll be at least three books, and hopefully it doesn't take four. I didn't intend for this to be like 40 book series,
yeah.
but I don't write short. I don't do too great with the short stories because I write deep.
Yeah, no, when you do write, you're very descriptive. It has a certain lyrical quality to it. There's I don't know how to describe I want to describe it well. So, but it's not a necessarily a poetic way of describing things, but the Kant used a phrase, the thing in itself, and I don't want to get too deep into Kant, but you seem to be able to describe the thing as it really is, and that's not a that's a compliment. I hope comes across as a compliment, and so you do a great job in taking an object and giving it its full description. And I think that is a quality as me as an author, I don't possess that quality. I'm more of leave it to the reader's imagination to fill in gaps. And that's usually
Well,
how
I
I
tried that.
operate.
I tried that, and I had a lot of pre-readers, alpha
Mm.
readers, people reading over the years and years and years. And if you do that too much, their mind goes. to the worst case scenario, which you weren't writing. So
Yeah.
you got to be clear,
Mm,
clear. You don't have to
yeah.
overtell or anything like that, but be sure that the appropriate details are there because otherwise their mind goes to the worst case scenario all the time, every
Yeah.
time. And they're traumatized by their own imagination because it's not on the page. That wasn't
Sure.
what you intended. So, to a certain extent, you have to be very explicit about what is actually happening, you
Yeah,
know.
no, I get that. I share something with people and they look at it the wrong way. I'm like, well, that's an interesting way of looking at it, but I'm like, that's not what I meant. But that's, but I don't know if I can write that way. I write differently,
Well,
and I think that
I had to learn how to do it. It's called deep third.
deep third,
So
yeah.
it's as intimate as first person, but you still get to tag all the names. And it's
Hmm.
very easy to shift from one point of view character to another because you
Hmm.
just start with that character in that
Yeah.
scene. So if that person, their name is in that first line, they're opening that scene, then it's their point of view. And you feel everything they feel, you see
Mm,
everything they see, you misunderstand everything they misunderstand, and you
mhm.
use the vocabulary that that character uses.
Yeah.
So if you look at the vocabulary for Stefan and Emerald, it's very different.
Mm. Yeah, and I do some things like that. Like I'm writing a historical fiction novel about the proto ball knobbers before the ball knobbers existed. And so it's a revenge tale. A brother goes on a revenge campaign, killing the 8 men who killed his brother and his sister-in-law. And so when I switch between the characters, Loretta, the sister-in-law, she's very pragmatic. You can tell that in the way she talks in her head. And so the reader can tell they're in Loretta's head. When they're in Quincy's head, he's very poetic. And so everything has this, it's colored differently. And so
Hmm.
it becomes prosaic. And, he describes things as light rippling like an ocean across the grass. And so he has that. And Thomas, he almost feels haunted all the time. So you can feel like there's this presence over his shoulder constantly haunting him. And so
Hmm.
you so I switched between those three types of personalities. Those are my three POV characters throughout the novel. And so how I try to do it. But I still think I overall my language tends to be economical and terse. Even though I do switch between I switch the psychological way of thinking between the three characters. So I do understand that part of it. And I think what you're doing is very good for the reader because the readers need guideposts. They need direction. So
Hmm. Well, yeah, but I never overtell. I
yeah.
never, if you're following the romance thread because that's what you like,
Mm,
and you just don't care about any of the other stuff, you'll still enjoy the story. And if you want the world building and all that, you'll still enjoy the story.
mm.
um, so writing terse or short, can
Mm.
be very poetic too. There's
Yeah.
a short story, 6 words, baby shoes for sale, never used.
Mm.
That's a story.
Yeah, it is.
That's a that's a moving story right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's tragic story. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
So,
and I'm not, and I don't mean to come across as like um trying to say that yours is I was just trying to say ours is different, but I think
yeah.
the differences is say a lot about the I think that's the beauty of writing because when you pick up a book, you're not just picking up words on a page, you're picking up an author, you know, and you're having a conversation with SV Farnsworth,
Hmm.
or you're having a conversation with me, and you're having an insight into the way a person thinks. and into their worldview and into the things that they've learned, into their education, into their background, into the way that they lived. And I think that's something we tend to forget when we pick up a book. We tend to have a very self-centered reader response type of view of it. Like the author doesn't exist anymore. It's just me as a reader picking up a book.
Right. So the questions, that hook you, or that burning question that you need answered, this book answers that really well for a lot of
Mhm.
people, and even people who have suffered. Um, I get a lot of reviews from people who say the author handled this well,
Yeah.
and then they'll read the next book and the next book and the next book that I've written, and the light bulb comes on, and you see that person who leaves these reviews in a trail, say, once you've been burned, everything is fire. That's the tagline for Monarch in the Flames.
Mhm.
And wrote this beautiful one-page review, and then she says, but that's no way to live. That's no way to live.
Mhm.
You're not really in danger every minute of your life anymore. You're safe. So why push everyone away and be afraid all the time? That
Yeah.
book changed her life. She's different
Yeah.
because
And
she read
I
the book.
and I think what we do with fiction is so important. We're taking really deep philosophical questions and we're presenting them to a reader in a narrative. And we're giving them a story that they can relate to. I think this is why parables from Christ are so effective 2,000 years later, because even though we may not always understand the context of the parable, and because, a Jewish audience and originally understood the parable a little different, but
Mhm.
the parable still has an impact in almost every culture it's told in, whether it's in Africa or Thailand or whether it's in the North America, because it's a narrative story that speaks to everybody wherever it's told. And an author has that same power over words that you can't get if I gave you a technical aspect of why you were suffering because of your trauma, as in some of the cases with Emerald. And so if I gave you Freud's explanation for trauma, and I don't like
Hmm.
Freud,
No,
but but let's say I gave you Freud's explanation for your trauma, it wouldn't be as impactful as a narrative account of someone else who's suffered trauma and how they got through it. And I think that's the power of an author. So I think that's the power of your book, honestly.
thank you.
You're
It
welcome.
was a lot of work. And you talked about the beautiful prose, but the revision process, that's what polishes the prose. They don't come out that way. They come out rough as dirt.
Yes.
And raw, and I pull it way back, and
Mm,
I polish, polish, polish as I revise, revise, revise. It takes years to write a really good book. That's
yeah.
why I don't crank one out, I might work on another series while all those ideas for the other one are coming into my mind.
Percolate.
These details
Yeah.
like Jane, you know, Jane of Appleton. Okay, then here's Jane later. I didn't need an extraneous character. I already had one I could use, and that makes it more powerful, ties it back to the beginning.
Yeah.
All that
I
takes
think
time. You can't just crank them out. I mean, the traditionally published world, I read a Tanya Huff novel, and I thought it must have been her first novel because it was pretty rough, and it was like her 15th, 20th novel, but they just forced her to write that fast uh, because little do we know, Penguin Random House was sued, and they had to admit that they're not a very good judge of what will be popular, and that the average new release sells 14 copies.
yeah. And I think you do better on your own as a self-published author, because you can at least talk your family into buying 15 most times.
Well, you'd think these other authors could do that too. But
Mhm,
if a lot of traditionally published authors don't have a newsletter, they don't reach out, they don't do events, they don't market themselves at all. They don't have a
mhm,
website or
mhm.
anything. And then they expect the traditional publishers to do it, and they don't. So you might
No.
as well have complete control
Yeah.
because the traditional publisher can say, "Oh, eliminate this whole thread," or "I don't like that character, rewrite it." And if you don't, well, they won't publish it. So,
Or when I was sending out my letter of inquiry along with some of my manuscript, and in my world there are no humans. There are no humans in my world. Um,
mhm,
I I wrote this book was written 2010 and rewritten and thrown away, rewritten and thrown away several times. But I decided long time ago that there wouldn't be any humans in my world. Well, they want, and I want to do this anyways, but they wanted Christian publishers and Christian agents wanted characters that were people of color. They wanted people who were trans or gay or in some of those storylines. These were Christian literary agents or Christian publishers asking for these things. And I'm like, well, I have no humans. So the best you can get is a furry because they're a minotaur. I, that's I'm just playing. But I'm like, that's it. And so and no one picked me up. No one sent me back a letter except to say no, we won't even look at what you have written. And that's what the publishing world has become. And
well,
so
they're gatekeepers, and they they're surviving off of who knows how. I mean, really, the Penguin Random House says they survive off of their evergreen list. So they'll acquire a small company because it has a book that still is popular and continues to sell. So that evergreen book, if you own Dr. Seuss, I mean,
yeah.
that sells like crazy. And they market those. They put those
Mm,
on spinners and they got those everywhere.
yeah.
Um,
Or as you know, they can still make money off of J.K. Rowling or Lord of the
mhm.
Rings or whoever sells the Bibles making money. But
Whoever
as
sells
far,
the Bible, almost all of them are owned by China.
yeah. And so you have all these real serious problems in publishing and with the agents. And even if they say that they're Christian publishers or Christian agents, there's some serious problems in that world. And so, and people don't really recognize that, I think. So I
Anyone who
think,
takes money
mm,
is beholden to the strings attached.
mm,
So you got to look who's who owns this, who's running this show from behind the scenes. And if China owns nearly every translation of the Bible, all these modern translations, they're going to change it. They did it in China. Why wouldn't they be doing it here? Why
yeah,
wouldn't they be influencing the media? Why wouldn't they be influencing the pastor who is paid to write a sermon or something? Why
yeah,
wouldn't they? They're subverting our whole country. So, yeah,
yeah,
don't get me started on politics. I do
yeah,
write political a little bit in my books, but it's more kind of dystopian. So
mm,
you're fighting the societal oppression, or and I don't want to like talk about that,
sure,
but I write about societies that are oppressive in one way or another. And in this Woman of the Stone, you get to see different points of view. In the North, uh, there's a lot of abuse and slavery.
mm,
In the mountains, there's on the west side, they have matriarchal society and how that can go too far.
mm,
Then
yeah, you
down
see
you
that.
had equality and it was happy. And then you had in the South where women are oppressed. So,
mm,
because the South and Nanoland are so connected, that's Emerald's mindset.
mm,
And then Darren, he's from the mountains and he's oppressed. And so
yeah,
he's got the same mentality she does, but they don't realize
that
that
they're
the other one
connected.
is, reacting the same way to the different
Yeah. Yeah,
situations.
and when I started the interview, that's kind of what I was trying to say, but I wasn't saying quite as well as you just did. Yeah, there's a touch of that, I think, through most good novels is a sense of that the world isn't quite fair, that the world
Yeah,
doesn't have everything it should. Even Tolkien, rel though he has a more positive view and it's not dystopian, he does have a sense that there are systems that aren't quite fair in his world. There is a sense that Gondor is not always going to be a fair nation. Even with Aragorn at the helm, it will eventually collapse. You get that with you do get a sense of that. And so in the future, after time, and his sons come into power, and their sons come into power, and so uh, there is that thread, and which is why he never really wrote a sequel to Lord of the Rings. He tried to, and he realized he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to write a political book. So, well, I do appreciate your time. We talked for quite a
hey,
while. I
glad to be
enjoyed
here.
it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
You're
If you'll
welcome
stay,
to call me back for a different series or different books.
absolutely.
Uh,
If you have another book when you come out, let me know. Or if there's something else you want to talk about, we'll do that. I'll be happy to talk about anything else.
hey,
And I enjoyed our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it too. I know,
I did. Thank you.
good. And so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, but if you'll stay around for a couple of minutes afterwards,
Sure.
and I say, I have a goodbye, I say at the end of all my podcasts now, but I'll do that real quick and we'll go through it. All right, so I'll see y'all. It's just a Ozark way of saying goodbye, which you know since you live in Joplin. All right.